If you follow the tech industry, you'll know this guy, Terry Gou, the Taiwanese billionaire founder of Foxconn, one of the largest electronics manufacturing companies in the world and a key supplier of Apple products. In 2019, he ventured into the world of politics, declaring his candidacy for Taiwan's president. But according to him, it was not his idea. Standing in a temple in a downtown district of New Taipei City, he claimed that the goddess Mazu had instructed him to run for president. He declared, "If Mazu says that you should step up, it is not in order to make money or for personal enjoyment. I tell you, I am like a godson to Mazu. She thinks of me like a godson. I will definitely respect and follow Mazu's will." So who is this goddess who gets involved in presidential politics? Mazu is a major goddess in Chinese religion. Historically, she's been viewed as the patron goddess and protector of sailors, and has been particularly popular in the southeastern coastal regions of Fujian and Guangdong, both of which have rich seagoing cultures going back thousands of years. Today, she's especially worshipped in Taiwan. In fact, by some estimates, devotees of Mazu make up around 60% of Taiwan's population, but she's also popular in Macau, Hong Kong, and Chinese diaspora communities all across the world, from Thailand to the US. In fact, the oldest Chinese temple in the US is a Mazu temple. Her name Mazu, sometimes spelled in English with a Z or with a TS, literally means mother ancestress. But the scholar of East Asian religion, Jonathan Lee, even says we can translate her name as Granny, because she's viewed as a spiritual grandmother who protects and heals her followers. But don't let that informal translation fool you. She's also considered a high-ranking goddess, known as Tian Ho in Mandarin or Tin Hao in Cantonese, meaning the Empress of Heaven. She's sometimes identified as a top goddess within the massive pantheon of Taoism, but she technically has no default religious affiliation. When it comes to Chinese popular religion, affiliation really doesn't matter so much, and people from all walks of life and religions, including Buddhists, worship her as a miracle-working goddess who fulfills practical personal needs. Now, unlike other gods from Chinese religion, like the Queen Mother of the West, it's believed that Mazu was an actual historical figure who became a god. Legends tie her to a miracle-working woman from a humble seafaring family, a woman named Lin Moniang, whose name literally means the silent girl from the Lin family, because apparently she'd never cried as a baby. She may have lived around the late 900s CE during the Song dynasty, and is said to hail from Mazu Island, located off the coast of Fujian province in the Taiwan Strait. Mazu Island has historically been a major pilgrimage destination for followers of Mazu, where you can visit the temple commemorating her birth and the gigantic statue of the goddess. Carved in 1988, the statue has become an archetype for how to portray her. According to one version of her most famous legend, Lin Moniang's 4 brothers were out sailing one day but ran into a storm and faced certain death. Back home, she then fell into a trance and her spirit traveled out of her body to save them. Unfortunately, her mother found her in a trance and awakened her too soon, and so she dropped her 4th brother into the sea. The 3 surviving brothers corroborated her story as soon as they returned home. Not long after her death, many other sailors claimed to have had visions of her protecting them at sea, and so the cult of Mazu emerged among seafarers in southeastern China. And yes, I did say not long after her death. One curious aspect of worshipping a goddess with a human past is that you can visit her alleged tomb today. It's on Nangan Island, aka Matsu Island, a small island governed by Taiwan in the East China Sea. Now, there are a lot of legends describing how she died, and some say that she simply ascended to heaven, but one legend says that she died at sea and her body washed up on this island. Pilgrims travel here during an annual festival celebrating her ascension. Although Mazu started out as a local hometown hero, from the late 11th century onward, she moved beyond her role as a purely localized folk deity and expanded into one of the most well-known goddesses in the Chinese pantheon, recognized with full imperial honors by ruling dynasties as the Empress of Heaven. She especially became the go-to guardian goddess for sailors everywhere. In 1123, the emissary Lu Yundi claimed that she saved him while he traveled to Korea on a diplomatic mission. The account reads that they ran into a violent storm. 8 ships collided and 7 of them capsized. It was only above the ship on which Lu Yundi was sailing that a goddess appeared at the top of the mast, and turned and moved as if she were dancing. Immediately they obtained a safe crossing. Similar miracle stories were repeated throughout the Ming Dynasty, and it was even claimed that she protected the famous treasure fleet of Admiral Zheng He as he sailed across the Indian Ocean. And sometime in the early to mid-17th century, the most well-developed version of her story and the various miracles attributed to her were compiled into a book called The Record of the Sagely Manifestation of the Celestial Consort. So what does Mazu devotion look like today? Her iconography is fairly consistent. In paintings, she's often depicted in vibrant red robes, while statues tend to portray her in maximum empress mode, decked out in imperial regalia. And while her worship dates as far back as the late 11th century, most artistic representations of her are from the 1700s or later, which more or less reflects the fact that it was by then that her popularity had exploded well beyond her home province. And since Mazu is all about compassion and protection, it's no surprise that she resembles both the Bodhisattva Guanyin and the Queen Mother of the West. All three of these beings fulfill similar purposes for people seeking just a little bit of divine intervention, especially for women seeking protection in childbirth. Guanyin and Mazu in particular are often worshipped together, and according to one tradition, Guanyin helped Mazu's parents conceive her. But people call upon the goddess for all sorts of things. For example, in 2021, one of the worst droughts in about half a century struck Taiwan. In response, thousands of devotees showed up at Mazu temples to pray for rain. And like I said earlier, despite her very specific regional origins, Mazu crosses many different geographic and religious boundaries. For example, consider the Chinese, Vietnamese, American Teochew Temple in Houston, where she's featured alongside Taoist and Buddhist figures alike. Her legends are also layered with Confucian teachings, so Mazu blurs the lines between religions. Some of her temples are registered as Buddhist, but the majority of Mazu temples are technically classified as Taoist, such as the historic Tin Hau Temple in San Francisco. But as I said, such distinctions don't really matter in daily practice. Outside of clergy members, practitioners in Chinese religion tend to freely mix religious ideas and practices. Today, she's particularly popular in Chinese diaspora communities. As of 2021, a Mazu shrine or temple can be found in 20 different countries, from Southeast Asia to the Americas, Europe, and Australia. She's very popular in historic Chinatowns in North America, partly because most of the early Chinese migrants to the US and Canada came from the southeastern provinces where Mazu devotion was traditionally strongest. And when they settled overseas, their local community guild halls called huiguan were often organized around shrines dedicated to her. And as I said earlier, the oldest continually operating Chinese temple in the US is the Tin Hau Temple in San Francisco, which was founded by Chinese immigrants in 1852, and new temples are still being founded. In 2022, Taiwanese American communities successfully lobbied for a state park in Washington state to be built honoring the goddess. All across North America, Mazu temples and Chinatowns often function as Chinese cultural centers. The Mazu Temple USA in San Francisco, for example, conducts ceremonies for all Chinese religious holidays, as well as offering classes on Buddhism, Qigong, and Chinese medicine. It may be hard to gauge how much people are still literally worshiping the goddess at these temples, but she remains an iconic figure, especially for immigrant populations who see her as a familiar face. As we saw with Terry Go, Mazu devotion is also very popular in Taiwan. According to the scholar Jonathan Lee, around 1,000 temples in Taiwan house Mazu as the primary god, and 20,000 temples house her as a secondary god. Many Taiwanese even consider her to be the patron goddess of Taiwan. She's believed to protect the island's people from storms, pirates, and even falling bombs. According to one legend, she was seen in the sky catching bombs during World War II, saving Taiwanese civilians from American bombing runs on the Japanese colony there, when the island was still under Japanese control. Historically, the Chaotian Temple in the township of Beigong has been one of the most important cultic sites for Mazu. During the festival season after the Lunar New Year, the township becomes absolutely packed with religious tourists. It's also considered one of the most miraculously powerful temples. If you want some miraculous help from the goddess, go to Beigong. But around the mid-1980s, the Dajia Zhenlan Temple located in Taichung eclipsed it in popularity. The Zhenlan Temple is the starting point of the massive Dajia Mazu pilgrimage. This is a 9-day pilgrimage during which practitioners carry an image of the goddess in a ceremonial litter on a round-trip 300-kilometer journey from her home in Zhenlan Temple to the Fengtian Temple in Xingang. The procession stops at dozens of temples along the way, drawing huge crowds of followers, and I do mean huge. An estimated 5 million people join this pilgrimage. Even during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 and 2021, around 600,000 people showed up. Devotees will often kneel on the ground, allowing Mazu to be carried over them, believing she will confer protection or good luck. Part of the reason Mazu worship continues to flourish in Taiwan is because of the events of the 20th century in mainland China. In 1966, Mao Zedong launched the Cultural Revolution, which suppressed many popular religious practices in China. But Mazu worship continued in Taiwan and the Chinese diaspora. Eventually, the ban on open religious expression lifted in China in the 1980s, and Mazu worship came surging back. Caretakers of Mazu's original temple on Meizhou Island reopened its worship halls in 1978. Only 2 years after the Cultural Revolution, Buddhism technically ended. Not long after, Mazu temples reappeared all across China's eastern seaboard, some reconstructed at a massive scale. The goddess has even inspired cross-strait tourism between Taiwan and mainland China. Taiwanese tourists visit temples in mainland China, and Chinese tourists attend the Dajiao pilgrimage. Though, as the BBC has reported, these cross-strait exchanges put Taiwanese worshippers in the middle of a political struggle. Even though Taiwan is self-ruled, the Chinese Communist Party has attempted to exploit these shared religious roots in an effort to impose its own rule over Taiwan. It's a form of exerting soft power. Wen Xianghan, an expert in Taiwanese religion, says, "On a basic level, China is using Mazu's maternal figure to attract the Taiwanese. You identify with your mother, you identify with Mazu. You identify with Mazu, you'll then identify with China." In other words, the Chinese government is leveraging Mazu's revered status in Taiwan to sway political opinion in favor of China. We especially saw this in how the Chinese Communist Party sponsored more Mazu exchanges between Taiwan and China in late 2023, leading up to the January 2024 presidential elections. So Mazu finds herself entangled in politics, a very familiar position for gods and goddesses throughout history. If you want to learn more about China, I highly recommend you check out the video series China Actually, made by the creator Polymatter. The series examines Chinese culture, economics, and politics, describing how they actually are on the ground without hyperbole. Polymatter explores Chinese dominance in rare earth metals, its nuclear policies, and the effects of its former one-child policy. And you can find the series exclusively on Nebula. Nebula is a streaming platform where you can find all sorts of video series like this. We call them Nebula Originals. These are high production value series that really showcase what Nebula is all about, empowering independent creators to do what they do best, make really, really good content. I'm a Nebula creator myself, and in fact, you can watch one of my upcoming videos right now over on Nebula. It's on the Mexican folk saint Jesus Malverde. Some have labeled him a narco saint, revered by drug cartels, so there's a really good chance YouTube will demonetize this video, which is something I do not need to worry about at all with Nebula. And this is something that I love about Nebula. It's creator owned. So when you support Nebula, you're directly supporting this channel, Religion for Breakfast, and you're also directly supporting some of the most passionate educational creators out there. If you sign up using my link below, you can get 40% off our annual plans, which works out to be a little over $2.50 a month. Though if you have some extra cash lying around, we're also offering a lifetime membership for $300. Pay once and you get access for as long as you and Nebula both exist. Again, link is pinned in the comments below. Thanks everyone.